When the translucent front wall is up, the lights will backlight the plane, casting its silhouette on the wall, so we can see the plane right up to the moment it vanishes.
In this video, I will reveal how David Copperfield vanished a Learjet plane. Here's a quick recap of the performance. Copperfield begins the trick by introducing a jet that has lights positioned behind it to project a shadow when the panels go up. The jet is surrounded by 50 volunteers who are all blindfolded and holding hands together, while Copperfield ties the jet with two straps on opposite ends. Then the front two panels are positioned to hide the jet while Copperfield turns on the light behind it, casting a shadow and convincing us of its presence in the enclosed area. He locks the panels, and as soon as the light goes off, the jet is nowhere to be seen. Now, of course, we know he didn't just make the plane vanish. This is a trick after all, and the plane simply has to be positioned somewhere else where it's not visible. This immediately draws attention to what's outside the panels, specifically the time of day when the trick is performed. What's with David Copperfield performing large object vanishes like the Statue of Liberty at night, and why this jet disappearance as well? And to add to this, the only reason we can see the jet is because of these few light sources strategically positioned on the opposite sides of the jet. Had the plane been repositioned somewhere, in any of the dark areas, we wouldn't be able to see it, simply because the jet wasn't running. Well, of course, they couldn't keep it running as there are people surrounding it. At this point, the explanation for this trick becomes very obvious. I know some of you are questioning whether the plane was real or a fake cardboard cutout. You can actually see from the beginning of the footage a close-up shot all around it, proving its legitimacy, that it actually exists there, which means we need to know exactly how he moved the plane. Now, he couldn't have started the plane for two reasons. First, the people standing dangerously close to the jet engine, and second, we would hear where it was going, and so would everyone surrounding it. For those who have traveled, you might have noticed vehicles called airport tugs, which move planes by attaching to one of the tires. You can clearly see these tugs have the potential to move entire Boeing and Airbus planes. So, considering the size of the jet, it could easily be moved by a standard airport tug. So, this plane tug was positioned right near the back panel in the darkness. But to allow the plane to escape, these panels had to be moved. Not only that, this particular group of people, standing at the back while holding hands, also had to be moved. In other words, they were part of the illusion as assistants, but acted as volunteers, unlike the others standing against the three faces. These three sets of volunteers only existed there with their blindfolds on for the testimony at the end of the trick, so if you suspect everything was staged, it wouldn't make sense for them to wear blindfolds. The blindfolds are used here for dual reality, meaning they wouldn't know who is really in on the trick and how exactly the plane is moved. Here is how they would execute the illusion. These two back panels open up like gates because you can see they have wheels at the bottom right over here. These two separate panels open up, giving enough room for the plane to be pulled out from the front wheel, as you can see in this animation. But what about the plane's shadow? How do they move the plane within a second after the lights turn off? Well, the secret here is the shadow isn't a real-time projection of the plane. In other words, a fake plane shadow. Notice that David Copperfield didn't turn on the lights before the panels were lifted. He only turned them on after the panels had blocked the view of the plane, meaning that inside both of these panels was an opaque cloth stitched within them that looked something like this in both of these halves. But some of you might be wondering, didn't David Copperfield mention the light source that will cast the shadow on the panels was positioned behind the plane? If that were the case, we would actually see two shadows, one from the opaque cloth stitched inside the panels, and another, much larger, true shadow cast by the plane itself. Because the light source is so close, that larger shadow would be so diffuse that you wouldn't be able to clearly make out the plane's shape. That's where the second task of those assistants come in. They had to reposition these lights from behind the plane to the front, so that as soon as David Copperfield turned the lights on, only one shadow would appear on the front panels, the fake one. And that's how Copperfield was able to vanish the plane during the brightest time of the day. Behind this mask, only the truth remains till we meet again.